True Talk, brought to you by Trueland Equipment. Join us as we explore cutting-edge machinery, groundbreaking technology, and inspirational stories from the field.
From the dedicated efforts of our team members to the triumphs and challenges of our farmers, True Talk brings you along every step of the way.
Whether you're a seasoned agriculturalist or simply curious about the industry, tune in to discover the fascinating intersection of technology, agriculture, and green machines.
True Talk, cultivating true conversations.
So we're going to talk agronomy, right? Season in review.
Yeah. We sure are. And by we, I mean you.
No, I mean we. You're the farmer in the room, and you're the brains behind this operation. I obviously love talking agronomy. I think you like talking agronomy.
Yeah.
I say this disclaimer over and over and over. As we continue to grow as a company, our territory continues to grow, and it makes it very, very hard to overgeneralize agronomics going on, in the field over the season when it's impossible to make everything. You can't paint the territory with a broad brush. Yeah, it's hard to do. So I've got to put that disclaimer out there, because you can sit here and talk about, hey, the crops are fantastic. They're probably not fantastic for some people.
And the worst part is, going off of that, you and I live relatively close together. When you consider our entire territory,
sure.
The chances now, there might be some differences in rainfall, but
and soils, and
yeah, correct.
Relative to our territory, we're fairly close together.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
We'll say that the soil types are different, and sure, the weather patterns are going to be different. And you're far enough north that even some of the maturities that we would grow would be different.
Yeah.
But
planting dates.
Right. Kind of hit and miss, but overall, I think we've talked about how we wanted to kind of do maybe a season wrap up, or kind of season in review, and talk about some of the things that we experienced from an agronomic standpoint. That could include weather, growth conditions, pests, anything throughout the growing season, throughout the plant maturity stages that kind of captivated us this year, I guess you could say.
Yeah, this is an interesting year. It has been an interesting year, and I'm just getting started in my career, so
sure.
My in years past reference, or
way
back in my day,
right.
It doesn't go back very far, but relatively to the length of my career so far, and my reference point for different growing seasons that we've experienced, I feel like this is kind of a wonky year. All of the years have been weird. They each have their own little niches.
You've caught some interesting scenarios in your 5 years, and you'd think this job would get boring from an agronomic standpoint as an agronomist, because what do? We go out, we plant the crop, we harvest the crop, and it's not a boring, repetitive job. It's just, you wouldn't think that growing crops could be so different from year to year, but they just start out different every year, and then they have different issues and different weather patterns and different markets. When you start encompassing all the different types of things that go into a growing season, I don't think I've had any two alike in 27 years.
Yeah.
So
I remember when I first started, so I came in right before planting season, and Josh was like, I don't even know what to tell people anymore because I haven't seen this. And then that was the next comment. The follow-up comment was, yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen anything twice, or no identical season twice. So.
Right. It's fascinating. I love this job. And I tell everybody that I've got the best job in the world. And we work with some really smart people too, as well. And when you're working with farmers, they're a very intelligent group as a whole, and you work with them, and you deal with what comes your way, and you put your heads together and make decisions. But it helps to control, as we've said in our last few podcasts, control what you can control. That's for sure. So,
that's a Josh quote.
Yep.
Josh Howard.
Let's control what we can control. We can't control Mother Nature. We can't control the grain markets, but we can control a lot. So, looking back, at a growing season, you about have to look before spring and see what things were like. And we talked about doing this podcast, kind of made a little outline. Looking back, you just kind of have to stop and think, what did we experience, so far? And I think for me, you go back to the planting season or even before planting season, we had virtually no precipitation over the winter. Incredibly dry winter. We went in a little bit dry, came out incredibly dry, and that was a concern I think for a lot of us is we virtually had no soil moisture to speak of. And
which typically I feel like we're worried about the opposite. We don't want to get too much rain in that late fall leading up into early spring. Soil structure and soil quality becomes a big concern. But so I actually looked it up when you sent me this outline. It was the second, according to Fort Wayne, the second warmest winter on record.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I would wonder if it was one of our driest winters. I'm sure it had to be.
It was the 62nd driest.
62nd driest, which is probably still pretty dry.
The second warmest.
Yeah. Interesting. I find that interesting. And what's another thing we didn't even talk about going back to March before planting season even started is the week came out of dormancy and it never frosted. It never went through a cold spell after that. And that's rare. Usually when the wheat comes out, it'll go back. It'll freeze again. You'll have multiple frosts and things like that. Pretty sure when that wheat came out of dormancy, it stayed out of dormancy and it just started going. And which is why we had an early wheat harvest.
Well, yeah, that snuck up on everybody so quickly.
Right. A week to 2 weeks ahead of time. So then fast forward to April, and then we started getting, as in general across the territory, again, not every single acre, but we started getting these little pesky rainfalls that maybe were a blessing in disguise. I don't know, because we would think about planting and the next day it would rain, and then we would wait a few days and we'd think about planting and the next day it would rain, and that cycle just continued for, goodness, 30 days.
But I think the hopefulness of, maybe we can start, everybody always, okay, so around our house, April 15th seems to be you're in an ideal world, that's when you would start. But
that's my calendar date, is April 15th.
And so now does everybody fit that? No. And are you mad if you're a week late? No. But I feel like that hopefulness of shooting for that April 15th quickly turned into a lot of stress when we were looking at the 15th of May, right. And there was 4 inches of rain in the forecast for the 10-day.
Yeah, it turned into May 15th real quick.
Yeah, yeah. And there was just, like you said, those little rains that popped up, and it was just cyclical. Never let anything dry out before it was another pop-up shower.
So hindsight, that probably was a blessing in disguise because we needed that rain. It didn't amount to, we didn't have huge rains. We just had a lot of rains. And looking back, it was probably a blessing in disguise to get that moisture. We needed it. We needed the moisture for sure. So
now I would have liked to see those rains fall, since it was so warm, fall a little bit earlier. But
right.
Beggars can't be choosers. I mean,
right. Yeah, that'd have been better in March or early April. But
we can't get everything we want, I guess.
Sure. So eventually we got in, right? And I think for the most part, you could kind of tell planting season for some of our customers kind of mimicked April. They would plant for a while, then they'd get rained out, then they would plant for a while and get rained out. So it was a little bit of a drawn out planting season, to the point where we knew, kind of made the comment that guys were going to have very little rest this spring. They were going to plant, then they were going to spray, then they were going to plant some more, then they were going to spray, then they were probably going to side dress, then they were going to probably plant some more. And it was just, and then they were going to harvest wheat.
Yeah.
Right. So it was literally concurrently one thing to another. And
spraying season felt like it was never going to end.
Yeah.
Side dressing and spraying season. Well, and I even remember we were side dressing, and then right across the road, we were simultaneously replanting.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I don't know. And then the next day, as soon as we finished side dress, it was, get the sprayer out. So
something was running probably almost every day from the moment you started planting till the moment you put that sprayer away, which was recently.
Yeah.
Something was always happening. We had people that were side dressing while other people a county away were planting their first corn.
Yeah.
Too. So just to show you how spread out that growing season was and how different those weather patterns were across our territory. So it was an interesting spring. It was tiring for a lot of people. I know. for sure. But we got through it, right? We got the crops up.
We always do, but
we
yeah.
had a few wet spots that we had to look at for a little bit that we couldn't get through or what have you. Haven't had that for a while, but those kind of, as the corn and the beans grow, those become invisible. Kind of forget about them. So
yeah, I will still say that rainfall wise and planting season wise, I'll take this over
2019.
19?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that really well.
I was away for a college internship, and I was so thankful I was not here.
That was the year, going back to 2018, we had about a 30-day lull in the harvest in 2018, and anything that was still in the field that didn't get harvested had a propensity to start going down.
Yeah.
So it was rough. So fast forward, take that late harvest, fast forward into 2019, and it rained all April and all May. And I had gone on a mission trip with my daughter that year, and I thought, we'll go around the 5th of June because planting season will definitely be over by then. Boy, was I wrong. Planting season started about then. So I will never forget that year. But again, it turned out to be actually a pretty good year. I couldn't believe it. The yields were good. We had beans that were planted essentially during double crop time for the first time, and they turned out to be, good beans. It's amazing how things adjust.
Yeah.
And things work. So
yeah. So like your comment, you said the corn came up. It always does.
Yeah.
It scares us a little bit, but it always does.
Yeah. So you're just, that's 5 years ago, and think of all the different things we've seen. Those are some pretty big extremes. I thought this year that, man, I thought we were pushing towards that 2019 mark this spring, but we didn't quite get there. So.
Yeah, which is good. I'm okay with that.
We got stuff up. We've had good weather. I know we're going to kind of chronologically go through this, but so we got everything up, right? We got our side dressing done. We got some early spraying done. One of the worst things about a year like this year when you have a little bit delayed planting is, depending on if you're doing burn down spray or whatnot, that it's hard to stay ahead of the weeds. If you burn down in March and then you don't plant until May, you're almost a whole spray cycle behind on weed control, because they want to kind of, what you're used to having being held off until the crop gets bigger, you're already 2 months past or a month and a half past your burn down, and you start getting weed escapes, and it throws your weed control off. So we did have...
Well, and we already talked about the fact that planters were still going when it was time for that first spray cycle. So we're just, in terms of spraying, not an ideal year where it just perfectly lines up and you're hopping out of one machine and into the other, and you're staying in that machine.
You're playing catch up with weeds and kind of chasing your tail a little bit. So that, again, you're going to have seasons like that where not everything falls into place like it should. So, but then we move on, right? We move on to our earlier growth stages, and obviously I'm looking at notes here when we talk, just as I kind of remembered and went and wrote some things down. But one thing that stuck out to me this year is we had a lot of Japanese beetles, and we talked about that, I think, early on. You and I did, how they were attacking certain things in our yard, and I thought they were going to be a huge problem. They didn't turn out to be that big of an issue in the crops themselves.
They just came in so early.
Yeah.
I think that's the...
Yeah, and they came in strong, really.
Yeah.
And they came in strong. But they definitely had certain varieties of soybeans that were yummy to them, and I'm sure a few flavorful corn silks that they liked to chew on. But for the most part, I kind of thought we were pushing towards an epidemic, and it fizzled a little bit. So that was good.
Yeah. Well, and the corn, speaking on that, a lot of it wasn't to the point. They came in early in conjunction with planting late. I feel like that kind of made for an ideal situation in terms of just pest control.
Right.
So
right, for sure. So we got those taken care of. Then we went through, I think as a whole, our territory experienced I would say, unseasonably hot early June. Do you remember that?
No.
We had 90-degree weather in the first 2 weeks of June. So,
well, yeah.
And what was interesting is we didn't have as much rain. We had a lot of rains, as we said, early in spring, but it didn't amount to a lot of rain. So when we had the corn plants that were pushing V2, V3, V4, they went through a very stressful 2-week period where we had 90-degree temperatures in early June.
I've tried to forget that.
Right. And it was nerve-wracking because they were showing a lot of stress, And some of that hit during the V5 to V6 stage, right when we're figuring that corn plant's determining those rows around the cob. So we took a little stress hit there, but we got that quote unquote $1 million rain. I think 1.5 inch rain that came at a really critical time, mid-June.
Yeah.
Pulled us out of that.
Yeah.
And quite honestly.
Yeah. See, stuff was starting to roll. I do. Yeah. See. Yeah.
Early.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Exceptionally early, I would say. And there's corn right behind our house this year, so kind of got to keep an eye on the corn crop. And yeah, I definitely do remember that now that you're talking about that. And
so 90 degrees isn't normal for us early June.
Correct.
So it was definitely some stressor. So,
but that rain to cool it off. Not only was it $1 million rain in terms of that was a nice hefty rain, but yeah, it cooled temperatures off very quickly.
To temperatures, and from that point forward, and I'll talk about that a lot, we had incredibly mild temperatures and honestly ideal mid 70s to low 80s basically up until recently. From that point forward, we had a very mild summer, and plants love it.
Well, we even had kind of like a first fall. It started to really get cool there for a while. We were wearing jackets outside, and then they got to be 90 degrees again. Yeah. Which we're currently in.
We've hit that spell, but corn and soybean plants would be happy with 75 degree and sunny.
Yeah.
Every day.
So would I.
They're like humans. As we've said that before in another podcast. So I don't think we truly appreciate, it's not been a great summer to go boating perhaps, but it's been fantastic for limited stress on the crops. So the point in that is when you have that early stress like we had at that V5, that critical V5, V7 stage of corn, we may have set ourselves back on rows around it on the cobs, but we can make that up with what we've had from that point on. So I think I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but think about the mild temperatures and the sunshine. Plants love sunshine.
Yeah.
Sunshine is so critical. 75 and sunny will get you a really, really, really good crop. And honestly, we've had those conditions since then. So we've been able to recover from that early stress. But it's important to mention that early stress because when guys go out and say, hey, I'm only finding 14 and 16 rounds, but they're 40 long. Well, yeah, they're going to be 14 and 16 around maybe if they went through that really hot spell at a critical time. But we've been able to make up for that in length and test weight, hopefully, as we push into harvest. So yeah, we got through that. Pest-wise, you're always looking for diseases. I was a little concerned for Phytophthora in soybeans just because it was so wet in the spring. And with soybeans, if you have wet conditions early on and then it turns off really warm, that's when that Phytophthora disease can really it infects the plant early on when it's cooler and wetter, and then when it warms up, it really starts to show. So didn't see a lot of that. I saw a little bit. I got called out to a couple fields where it was blatant Phytophthora and the ground was still really soggy where those soybeans were, and it was pretty obvious what it was.
As I say, it popped up where you'd expect it to pop up.
The soggy clays, right?
And probably not anything that they haven't seen in those same spots before. That's probably a constant battle in those areas where we did see Phytophthora come out.
But it's expected. You just have years. It was just a prime year for that. I thought we would see it a lot worse than we did, so we got through that as well. And then we start thinking about some storm patterns. So we had a couple tropical storm remnants. You said it was a hurricane.
I don't know.
I can't remember. All I know is that thing came up from the southwest and dumped a whole lot of rain and a whole lot of wind on the Indiana side
and
of our
pests.
territory. And pests. Yeah, we'll get into that too for sure. Because pests will travel with weather patterns. So
we saw that.
Yeah. So we had some corn. We had a storm come through, and we had a lot of flat corn, and most of that was because corn that was young enough that was not fully rooted, so it actually just laid over and was able to gooseneck itself back up pretty quick. We had some green snap. We had some corn that was in that rapid growth stage. Not a great stage to be in when you have hurricane winds coming through. Or tropical storm remnant winds coming through your territory. So
I put you on that hurricane
Yeah.
Hurricane wording. That's my fault.
No, and it might have been a hurricane. I just remember the word. I thought barrel was kind of a funny name.
Yeah, because my dad joke of the last episode was that it barreled through here.
It
Ha ha
sure
ha.
did. It was crazy. It didn't seem that bad, but man, when you got up the next day and looked at the corn, so we had some elbowed corn. Actually, a lot of it really. Rows fields that were planted north and south are always going to catch those west winds, right? A little tougher than the rows that are running with the wind. So a lot of those fields, and that kind of changed the way we manage some fields from that point on, right? How we're going to necessarily get application done. If guys were wanting to put fungicide on, if they were going to use a ground rig, they probably had to switch to an airplane or a helicopter or a drone. Some of that gooseneck corn was not able to get, we weren't able to get through that with sprayers from that point, just because the rows were kind of laid over a little bit. And,
Yeah, that was kind of a hot topic with ASPs, I know, for a while there. So
and it's disappointing because we've made a lot of progress.
ag service providers.
Yeah. We've made a lot of progress in getting ground rigs more involved in fungicide application, and they've done a really good job.
Yeah.
And that's been good for us. It's been good, I think, for the customer, good for the SPs. We were also at a point where we were having a lot of trouble getting airplanes lined up. You know, the whole country needs airplanes, and sometimes you take a back seat. So getting ground application more involved in what would you say tall corn application has been a good thing for us. But we had to back off a little bit on that this year with some of the corn going through those windstorms. And anything else you want to add during that time? Soybeans just kept chugging along.
Yeah. I feel like soybeans are just kind of forgotten this year. I mean, I feel like corn just, and not that that's not a common occurrence, but the gap was exceptional this year. There was a bigger gap in how much we were paying attention to our corn crop.
Sure.
Which obviously I'm not going to gloss over the fact, corn prices are low, and that's where everybody's attention goes. So not a surprise there that we see a little bit more emphasis put on creating a high yielding crop as best we can.
I get accused a lot, even during some of our clinics, of maybe not talking about soybeans enough, and trying to consciously do better with that. But the reality is soybeans are made in August. Well, and the other thing about corn is like a mathematic crop, if you think about it. Everything's systematic and it's measured, and your populations are so critical in your stands. And soybeans are a little more forgiving, a little more subjective.
But you can also have a little bit more fun with beans.
Sure.
We see some of that wacky, just harebrained research come out of beans, and it's fun. I mean,
hey, we just had a new yield record.
Yeah.
In soybeans.
Yeah. Yep.
Fantastic.
That award was presented at Farm Progress.
200 bushels? Over 200 bushels.
I don't know.
Really
I don't know
close.
who it was. Yeah.
Can you imagine that?
I know it was. Yeah. I know the brand, and I saw it on Twitter that they're presenting that award out in Boone this week, but
you didn't get their secrets. The high yield guys will only tell you enough.
The NCGA, it's always funny. The NCGA, if you look through the booklet of winners or whatever, it's, what'd you plant? And then what'd you put on it? And it's about as minimal information as you can get. But
right, yeah, they'll never share. They'll never share their entire.
Well, they shouldn't. That's like their recipe for success.
Yep.
They're,
more power to them. So that kind of pushes us into the pollination.
Oh wait, we didn't talk about insects.
Insects. What do we want to talk about for insects?
Do you want to talk about aphids?
Yeah, I do.
You said you want to talk about aphids
because they came in after pollination.
Well, I know, but we were talking. Well, I just figured this would be a good lead-in.
Oh, on the
because we're talking about
storm fronts. Yeah.
The hurricane, not hurricane.
Yeah, right. The remnants of whatever that was. So yeah, you're right. We did have kind of a unique pest in corn this year, and we actually had corn aphids in a lot of our areas, actually across a lot of our territory. And some guys may not know that unless they were looking for them.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things when you see
some people might not have planted susceptible varieties also. That's
right. Or the tasty varieties. But aphids typically are a problem in soybeans, not every year, but you got to watch for them when certain weather conditions present themselves. But we had kind of an outbreak of corn aphids over about a 2-week period. Started on the Indiana side and went to the Ohio side. And I was under the impression that there's no doubt they actually can blow in on storm winds. And I'm pretty sure that's what happened. And that's why we had them. And I would say I think this is my 27th year in this field, and I can remember one, maybe 2 other years where we actually had corn aphids to speak of. And this year we had them, and you go into the cornfield, you look up and you see this mass of gray material on the top of the corn plant and on the tassels, and that's where those aphids were. So it had to be notated.
Yeah, I know that U of I believe, is the one who said that they were blaming that wholeheartedly on Beryl.
Oh, they were?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I did not read that. That was just from from up here in my brain. But
I don't have the big up here in my brain storage because I don't have all that experience. But yeah,
I think most people would laugh at you if you told them, "Hey, they blew in on the storm." But I was pretty confident that's how that happened.
There is a published article because I like watch as much as I can, stay up to date, and I subscribe to all the extension posts and whatnot, research departments from surrounding universities, and yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's what their conclusion was.
So aphids in general, piercing, sucking mouth parts, like the stink bugs, they want to feed on that green chlorophyll and kind of puncture that leaf. And the cool thing about aphids is there are certain things that can keep them under control. A lot of times when aphids come in, if you get really, really hot, high temperatures, their numbers will dwindle fairly quickly. They don't like a lot of heat. They have a lot of natural disease type things. If you get a lot of moisture, they'll die. They got some disease and parasites that can control them pretty quickly. And then insects. That's why one of the reasons we love ladybugs. Ladybugs love to feed on aphids. So if you ever see a ladybug, be nice to it. Right.
I just killed one at my house last
night.
Did
you? See, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to throw them outside and say, "Go eat some aphids."
I was not feeling carrying it outside. Wasn't feeling that generous.
The Chinese, the Asian lady beetle versus our kind of traditional red ladybugs. But
yeah, it was definitely an orange one with smaller spots.
Yeah, those are a little different, but they still eat aphids too. But they're a tremendous help to control aphids. So the reality is, kind of how I handled the aphid situation, and we haven't talked about fungicides yet, but if guys were spraying fungicide on corn and they had aphids, I said just throw something in to control them. The thought was by the universities, they kind of dwindled enough that they weren't going to be a big problem, particularly by the time they got to Ohio. They were the word on the street was economically it wasn't going to be necessary to control them. But I felt like we had some high enough numbers that if we were already making a trip out there, insecticide was cheap enough to go ahead and try to knock them out, because we had some pretty good looking corn in a lot of those areas where we had high aphid numbers, and to me it was important to get them. And
that's just one of those things to say. That's the last thing you want to say impacted your yield,
right? And as weird as it sounds, not only can what happens is if they're high enough numbers, they're going to feed on your tassels, they're going to feed on your chlorophyll, they're going to discolor that leaf, right, and take some of the green out. They can also hamper, if they get heavy enough, they can hamper photosynthesis by literally covering the green surface with themselves.
No way.
Oh yeah,
See, I would have just thought it was from chlorophyll.
Or both. Yeah, I mean they can literally cover. They get pretty high in numbers if you see a plant with.
I mean they do get pretty thick. I know that they their strength in numbers there. I feel like all huddle together.
So that was cool. That was a cool thing to talk about. We sent an alert out internally about that, saying, hey, this is kind of a pest we don't see very often, and here's the situation. So,
and by we sent an alert out, Josh means that he got to nerd out about it because he likes those weird things.
Because I'm a nerd. That's what I said. Yeah. So that brings us into pollination, right? And typically in pollination, again, back to that control, what we want to control, we want to send, and I guess we'll say pollination and soybean plant reproduction as well. Controlling what we can control, we want to send our plants into those, into that time as healthy as possible, right? And as in good a shape as possible. Typically the stresses during pollination, we can't control the weather. We hope that it's not super hot and dry. We want sunshine during pollination. The things that we can control are having a healthy crop, right? Having it fed, having it nurtured, and having it coming into pollination in as good a shape as we can have. So typically when I think about pollination, it's, there's been a lot of years where we've just suffered through a lot of heat and dry conditions, and you're stressing about it, thinking, oh, this is terrible pollination conditions. And a lot of times it works out okay. I would say we had some of the best pollination weather that I've seen in a long, long time this year.
I would say if we had to pick one thing that was the best part about this year. That would probably have to be it. It's just the
100%.
pollination weather.
Cool. We had a nice big rain right before pollination. We had ample moisture, and that was what we needed after we came out of that hot spell in June that we talked about, where we had some of those early stresses. The best way to overcome that was good pollination, and that's what we had. We had tremendous conditions during pollination, and it was fantastic.
We needed that.
Yeah, the only negative side of that is when you have cool and wet, you tend to potentially promote some late ear rot diseases that they can come in and infect through the silks during that time. So there is a little bit of a trade-off by having cool and wet during pollination.
Yeah.
But we'll take it definitely over hot and dry for sure. So pollination was good. We know on soybeans we have a long period of reproduction. When you start flowering that soybean, you can be putting pods on and still putting flowers on at the same time. So I would say that mild weather has definitely transferred to the soybean crop as well, where we had some pretty good conditions through flowering and through pod formation. So no complaints there.
Yeah.
At all. And you know what? As we get into maybe doing some yield checks, I think we're going to start seeing the results of that. We're already getting some pictures and seeing some ears that have pretty long.
Yeah.
A lot of length in kernels. So that paid off for sure.
Yeah, I would say, and I've even seen kernel depth. I mean, kernel depth I'm not underimpressed with. We'll put it that way.
Absolutely.
So
that's huge too, right? Test weight. That's where we're going to get our test weight.
Yeah.
So again, that's how we make up those.
I am a little concerned about test weight, I will say, going into this fall. I feel like some yield checks have been high on the higher end, and just kind of piecing together what this season has looked like, I'm a little surprised at some numbers that we're seeing and hearing. Now, if that turns out to be the case and that's what we're averaging, I will take it any day.
Right.
But I do feel like we're a little high on yield checks versus what we're going to see.
I would agree with that. I tend to actually, in a conversation I had on the way over here, I would agree with that. Maybe they're a little, maybe I wouldn't say fictitiously high, but a little higher than I would probably have them. I'd be a little more conservative. The only thing I think outside of disease that can maybe affect our test weight at this point is if we run a little short on nitrogen. That's the one thing this year that's kind of been in the back of my head is we've had just enough rain to where we probably suffered a little bit of nitrogen loss.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we didn't see really a lot of nitrogen deficiencies per se, but I think we probably will see a little bit creep in as we start finishing grain fill, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I think we can survive that.
But I think also that's going to kind of get lost in the shuffle because you're making sure that stuff's drying down.
Yeah.
And you're watching more dry down now than you're watching for some of those late diseases and those late deficiencies. So I think, my conclusion there is that if it's there, it's probably going to get lost.
Right. If there's ever a time to run out of nitrogen, it's when you're finishing out. Right. That's okay.
Well, let's hope that you're not.
we probably have. I guess I'd much rather run out now than be stressed the whole season. I think that plant,
than 2 months ago.
Yeah, I think that plant can take what it needs from the stock just for that tiny little bit of last bit of finishing. So, right, and then so and typically hand in hand with pollination, going back to pollination is fungicide application, and same.
Can't gloss over that.
Yeah, same with soybeans in terms of reproductive, R2, R3, R4 stages, and.
So, okay, you have more experience than me. Is there just that much more fungicide being applied now? Is there less planes? What's the big bottleneck there?
Well,
because I feel like it was never, everybody was pushing super hard. Fungicide. Then we went to 2 apps of fungicide, and then it was a big push on the timeliness of it, which I totally support all of that.
Right.
I'm a huge supporter of fungicide applications, and especially I even like the 2. Now, obviously based on your operation, we can talk more about that. But what's the big bottleneck there? Because I feel like that was never a thing, and now it's a thing. So
the bottleneck meaning what's keeping us from getting it on sooner? What's keeping us from getting it across more crops?
Well,
because this year's different. This year's different. You're right. We did have a massive push for fungicide. For a lot of reasons, but one of them is what's down this year versus what was high last year. It's the markets,
Yeah.
The grain markets is a big driver of that.
And I'm talking like five years, the past like 5 years,
But,
because
and a lot of that's relative to grain markets. People are willing to. It's really easy to invest inputs in a crop.
Yeah.
When you have good markets. Number one. Number two is the onset of tar spot. 5 years puts you about the window when we started. Tar spot started becoming much more of an issue working down through our states, both Indiana and Ohio. A little more on the Indiana side, and that kind of.
Yeah, especially more for me. I feel like,
Right.
We kind of focus where I am in north. I don't really think too much about the south, which obviously southern, I would never think about southern rust. I don't spend too much time thinking about that. But tar spot, I think about that all day. So, yeah.
Southern rust is a wicked disease, but it's just so rare. It comes in every, kind of like the aphid, every 5 or 10 years, and that's a weather pattern thing as well from the south. But our tar spot originates in northwest Indiana. They get hit with it pretty hard every year.
Yeah.
And so one thing this year, it was an interesting year because you knew that guys were going to scrutinize their fungicide cost heavily this year because the grain markets are down.
Yeah.
And that's a $30 to $40, input.
And there's a lot of people who dropped from 2 apps to 1.
Absolutely, 100%. And
That's 50-50, I would say.
the other part of that is, which made it interesting, is tar spot was found early in a lot of our AOR, very early. Now, that doesn't mean it was found heavy. It doesn't mean it was...
I was just say, I haven't heard of any... Now, I would say fungicide is more routine now than what it was 5 years ago. But I haven't heard of any decimating tar spot outbreaks. So
just maybe a couple in oddball places. Like, it's almost like it jumps around and skips counties. Certainly, tar spot is variety, has a lot to do with it. I don't think we realized that at first, but there are some varieties that you can have no tar spot in an area and you can just have one field of corn that just has it terribly bad, and you can pretty much isolate that to the variety. But the fact that one guy can go out and find one tar spot lesion and report it, and we can say, hey, it's
an entire county turns.
Yeah. So, and I think that's probably along the lines of what was happening early, but there
is a little bit of fear associated with tar spot, and I think that's why you see the threshold for that. We were talking about aphids earlier. The threshold for aphids is so great that even when you see them, it's are we worried?
Right.
Sure, but no. When you see tar spot, but that is a rapidly evolving disease. I mean, that's something that you don't want to give it time to. Why are you laughing?
Because when I tell my guys, or our guys, I should say, when you see tar spot,
they can be your guys. You can claim them.
when you see tar spot on a leaf, you should have sprayed yesterday.
Yeah.
That's what I say.
Yeah.
When should I spray? Yesterday.
Yeah.
So it does move very fast. So you just gotta look, you gotta scout. And we did. And there were guys that I went out and said, okay, this looks like you're gonna probably have a tar spot lesion informing here, because you can see that halo and that bleach spot. It's time.
Yeah.
And I've used tar spots as an excuse to really kind of shift my fungicide applications around anywhere from VT up to R4 and corn. And right or wrong, I'm starting to rethink that a little bit after talking to some other guys and networking a little bit. But if you're going to do a one trip on fungicide, I've always told guys, VT is kind of when you want to start doing it, but really let's kind of watch where tar spot's at. Let's maybe adjust that application window a little bit to try to get it so that we don't have any reoccurrence, a month later. Yeah. And the reality is we have this year, because of the extended growing season and the variety of growth stages we've had all at one time, that just means there's a larger window for tar spot to occur in as well. So it was very likely this year that if we sprayed fungicide at VT or at R1, we're probably going to have tar spot come back in late.
Yeah.
The question is it coming in late enough that it's not an issue? So, and that's the case. I mean, we're sitting here right now knowing that any tar spot we're seeing, and we're seeing it, is we're just going to let it ride.
Yeah. There is absolutely no reason that anybody should be spraying fungicide at this time. I mean, you have to let it ride. What's funny is last year I was shopping at one of those like fall markets or whatever, and somebody had made the corn husk wreaths, and they had leaves and everything.
And the dolls? Did they have the dolls?
No, like creepy. Like, this is like I probably would have purchased one to go on my front door. However, my determining factor was I looked at those and they were covered in tar spot. And I was like, I can't have an unhealthy corn leaf hanging on my front door. That would be like, I don't know. That's just an advertisement for bad corn health.
That might be the new normal, is tar spotted corn wreaths and corn dolls or corn husk dolls. So.
You know, if that is, I think I'm just going to have to start dousing a couple plants in my backyard and some fungicide so I can have some pretty corn wreaths.
That would have been awesome. You should have took a picture of that. That's actually
Oh, I'm sure
hilarious.
we'll see it again.
Yeah.
I'll do it for
Somebody
you this year.
bought that somewhere.
Well, you know, there. I feel sorry for the sucker who did, I guess.
My tar spot wreath.
They probably don't even notice. They're probably like, I like the color
Somebody
variation.
took a little marker and put little black dots on it.
It's tan and black. Yeah,
That's
my
clever.
spray paint can was just running out, getting to the end.
Tar spot has definitely driven our fungicide programs, I think, over the last few years, like you said. So, and then again this year, man, we could probably spend a whole podcast on fungicide. Really, it's such a fascinating.
We should.
We probably should. We'd put people to sleep, I think. But
We would have fun.
there's so many things to talk about. You know, you talked about the multiple trips. You know, there's people that are putting early fungicide really in the furrow, right?
Yeah.
There's and knowing that you do that, you're going to come back maybe at VT. Got guys that are spraying maybe V7, V8, and knowing we're going to come back at R3 or R4.
Well, not in furrow, 2x2.
Yeah, or 2x2, whatever. Put it on, at planning. So there's those scenarios, and then I'm starting to kind of rethink, and I'm going to be interested to see if we have any vomitoxin issues.
I was just going to ask you about that.
It's a dirty word, right? We don't like vomitoxin, but I don't know that we've truly been able to 100% put our finger on why we have it.
We had some last year.
Usually there's some everywhere. There's almost always some, but starting to kind of rethink maybe that fungicide application to where maybe we focus a little harder on one trip at silking and then maybe another trip later. There's a way I think we can start maybe attacking that problem, and that comes from a conversation I had with someone in the industry. But that's, again, like I said, we could spend a whole podcast on fungicide and diseases. But
Well, and that's also going to change year to year. I mean, what people are willing to do. That's why it's better for us to just give a recap on what guys are doing versus tell you ahead of time what you should do.
We could get in the weeds for sure. But anyway, so that kind of covers the corn. And then obviously soybeans is a fungicide topic as well. And, I've found that for the people that I work around, guys are either going to spray it on their soybeans or they're not.
Yeah.
And to me, it's part of my program. And a lot of times we're throwing an insecticide in with that as well. And look, I don't know anybody that wants to just throw a bunch of pesticides out in the environment. That's not the point. But we see a lot of synergy, even with corn, when we're putting some insecticides in. And I've noticed on the corn side, and we'll jump back to corn real quick. The last few years, I feel like we had started to see a lot of grayish and blackish kernels at the end of cobs harvest and some things like that. So what that is some late diseases, probably some insects coming in and feeding on the end of those cobs, vectoring in diseases. So when we've thrown some insecticides in with fungicides, I think that grain quality's gotten better too.
Yeah.
Because it's eliminated a lot of that. And we're going to say the same thing on the soybeans. Like I said, guys are either going to spray it or not. Typically on soybeans, when you'd see a yield boost, it was going to be 2, 3, 4 bushel, maybe 5 bushel with fungicide. But then there's been instances where I've had guys lose 10 to 15 bushel with a severe frog eye leaf spot outbreak or something like that. So you go through that one time, you're going to keep fungicides in your soybean program. And the nice thing is with soybeans, you can use cheap fungicides.
Yeah.
Right?
You don't need those 3 modes of action, high dollar. Yeah.
Not now. And so that's a good way to push guys. Hey, maybe we can invest heavy on a quality product for corn, right? Because we're going after these targeted diseases, whereas soybeans we can a lot of times get away with the generics. So it's a little bit more cost friendly. And like I said, guys either do it or they don't.
Yeah. White mold.
Thank you for bringing that up. I did not have that on my outline, but I wrote it in this morning. We definitely have white mold this year. So that's a booger.
Yeah.
Don't like white mold. And I don't know if you were on my agronomy session that I did yesterday internally, but we talked about white mold. And
yeah, thanks for the shout out.
Yeah. Oh, I did. I always give you a shout out because we always talk agronomics, right? Jordan always sends me good pictures of things going on in her neck of the woods, but we've got white mold showing up pretty good this year. And as I thought about it, and it kind of, it's always in the back of your mind, but I had a customer send me a picture of his field, and this one particular variety he had, every field that he had it in had white mold. And it's tough. Oh. It's a very, very tough one because once white mold becomes part of your soil structure, it's there. for a long time. And I've had guys that have gone to 7 to 10 years of corn on corn to try to get white mold populations down. And it's a toughie, but
10 years of corn on corn.
Absolutely. To try to break that white mold cycle. And I'm not so sure I don't think it worked very well. Just between you and me.
I've heard the 7-year sickness, but man, 10 years of corn on corn.
Yeah. I think they did 7, but I mean, you'd about have to go 10. But here's the thing with white mold. And again, I brought up the analogy yesterday of your house. If you have a lot of moisture in your basement and no air ventilation, you're going to get mold.
Yeah.
Okay. It's kind of the same way in a soybean field and a corn field. So we've had ample moisture, not devastating moisture during the season, but ample moisture where it's stayed wet, on the ground and in the canopy. We've had foggy mornings. There were times in
so many foggy mornings.
There were times in early August we thought it felt like fall mornings, right? You had that crisp, dewy, wet. So we've had lots of dew, we've had lots of fog, and we've not had a lot of wind. That's the crazy thing with me is I looked back over this growing season. I thought, man, outside of a couple rainstorms. Storms
are the only time that, and I'm the same way. I look back in spraying conditions. I'm like, think about how many days where it was truly too windy to spray.
Yeah. Whereas usually it's the opposite. There's very few available days to spray. This summer, we just didn't have those windy days. It's unbelievable. That is so different than probably the last 10 years.
But then we got high winds with some of those storm cells.
When we did get wind, we got high wind, right?
It was made up for the daily breeze.
But on a daily basis, it was relatively still. And I just, that's so different than what we experience. Typically where I live, we have windmills, right? For a reason, just west of me, there's a reason there's windmills. You don't put windmills where you don't have wind.
Yeah.
So we've had a lot of still fairly calm, I guess is a better word, days. And so that lack of air movement also kind of creates that environment to help that white mold type diseases grow. Also, I mean, almost all diseases are fungus driven, right? And whenever you have a lot of moisture and not a lot of air movement, you're going to have that potential for fungus. So it's been an ideal year for white mold to form and grow. And I'm just hopeful that most guys have varieties that are able to shut it out.
Yeah.
Because it's an ugly one.
Yeah. I mean, I think that goes to, especially when you're talking varieties and the susceptibility to that, and then the lack of air movement, we're talking about bushier plants.
Absolutely.
I think that and trying to push yields in that plant structure, I feel like that kind of speaks to some of that susceptibility. And then we're also talking, 15, 20, 30s, which,
ventilation is important. You don't think about it until you get a situation like that, how important ventilation helps us move pollen around. It helps a lot of things happen, but having a little ventilation definitely helps keep those areas. We want water, but we don't want them constantly wet, right?
We want them to have a sip, but we don't. Yeah. We're getting really needy here.
Right. Well, plants are growing things, right? So we want to put them in the best condition possible. So that was an interesting topic to discuss. So we got to deal with that. When you're talking about white mold, we can't cure it. What we can do is, okay, we're going to start being really particular about our variety selection. We're going to maybe adjust our fungicide program, knowing that white mold is potential. We can maybe adjust some things, maybe plan on 2 trips. But variety selection is going to be key in that for sure. So guys need to know where it's potentially a problem.
Yeah.
And adjust accordingly. So
control what you can control.
Control what you control. So then moving on just to some late season. That's a kind of a late season conversation. We're going to watch for frog eye leaf spot again. We're out of the window to treat much from this point forward. Watching for stink bugs. I hate stink bugs. They stink.
Really? You don't say.
I don't.
I have seen a few more than what I would like to admit.
Sure.
Nobody
likes stink bugs. They don't like them because they can sneak into your house when it's time to go to winter.
I should say I've seen some outside that I still don't like.
When you go into your shed and pull out a box and you see a few dead ones in there, right? No, but they're deceptive in soybeans. They when they're in high numbers, I think a lot of times you don't see them when you're walking in the heat of the day. They're probably doing a lot of their work in the morning and dusk and night, and they can feed on the leaves. They feed on the pods, and they can actually shrivel that seed up, very similar to what frog eye can do. So I always talk about frog eye leaf spot and stink bugs kind of in the same breath because they have very similar, their damage looks pretty similar. So
and this year, protecting that bean pod is going to be a big thing.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about bean yields, I don't think, but There is a lot of premature dry down, where some guys are worried about that pod and that bean fill.
Yeah.
Just as we move into the end of season and wrapping things up, is that plant, does it have enough stamina and does it have enough time to kind of fill that out and push those yields to where we want them to be? So
we're still making beans right now. Absolutely.
Yeah. And
100%.
so stink bugs in a year like this, where there's already those concerns, could be something to watch out for sure.
Yeah. That would be one pest that you would potentially do a late application on if you had to. It doesn't happen very often, but if you had the numbers, again, when I tell guys, at that point you're looking at economics, you're looking at harvest window, because then whenever you put an insecticide out there, you have to wait so many days to harvest. Read your label. Please check your label for the pre-harvest interval. But so that's kind of it on soybeans, right? At this point, we're mostly just kind of notating what we're seeing and making management decisions, thinking about the management decisions we're going to make over winter for next year. And then corn, I got a note in here that we're kind of watching from again, we've talked about tar spot possibly coming back in, but disease-wise, we're done controlling diseases in corn. We're kind of looking for maybe going to watch for any ear molds, any stalk rots. We're going to do our stalk test. We're going to do the pinch test at the bottom of the stalk. We're going to push them over. We're going to make sure that we know what varieties are going to stay intact and stand and what varieties we need to put higher up on the harvest list. Kind of looking for ear feeding insects. Not a lot you can do about those other than just know that they're an issue, or maybe know that there could be a grain quality issue, right? So again, back to that whole, where's something going to be on the harvest list, things like that. So you hate to look for things after the fact. Obviously, earworms come from earworm moths, and we control earworm moths by watching their flights and trying to kill them when they're laying eggs and get the egg masses and things like that. But at this point, it becomes, hey, what's our grain quality going to be? Which varieties are going to be standing well into harvest? Which varieties are the ones I need to move up to the top of my list? Because we probably will have some stalk rots. We probably will have a little bit of root rot here and there on some susceptible varieties or susceptible hybrids, just because of the amount of moisture that we had. And we started out a little bit moist too. Don't forget we planted a little heavy in spots as well.
Yeah,
so.
Especially if people are used to, if we're still doing 2 fungicide applications, then you can start to factor in that stay green and all of that, and kind of decipher what your planting list. And it might not fall with how you planted things.
Right.
I think this is a year where we might have a little bit higher moisture corn coming through the combine, because just to prevent some of those things. Yep. We're controlling what we can control. Man, I really shouldn't have named the last episode that. We should have titled this one that. But yeah, I think that we are going to see some higher moisture corn coming off, and people are just going to bite the bullet when it comes to that, put it through their combine and get it out of the field and get it off before we have some of those bigger issues come into play.
100%. And stay green's a wonderful thing too. People think there's a misconception. There is a misconception about, hey, if we use fungicide, our plant's going to stay green and our corn's going to be wetter. That's not the case. But what we're talking about is actually harvesting corn a little bit wetter, because we want to get it out of the field.
Yeah.
Getting it in, I'd much rather harvest wet corn than flat corn.
This is a fungicide, crop protection, crop health versus
right.
a diseased
right.
wet field.
Absolutely.
Yeah, those are 2 different things for sure. And yeah, definitely that's a good call out. Want to make sure that there is the distinction between the 2 types of moisture that we're talking about.
Prioritize your fields.
Yeah.
For harvest.
Yep.
That's huge this year.
And I think there's a lot of people that still rely back to, we're just going to count up GDUs, and this is 110 day, that's 110 day, and that's that. Yeah. This year is not the year where you probably, I'm not going to give recommendations, but if I were, that would probably be my recommendation.
For this year,
you're qualified to do that. I'm not.
I could give a hoot about maturity. I'm looking at which fields are showing me they're going to stand and stay intact. Yeah. Which fields have the varieties that might have been a little less healthy, that might have a more of a propensity to drop ears or propensity to go down. I want to get to those fields first, and whenever I can, within reason. Absolutely. And that's not necessarily to scare people off. It's more of just saying, hey, it's a probability thing. We're probably going to have some stalk rot somewhere.
Well, that's just like we tell people all season that they need to scout their fields. And now we're going to say that going into harvest, as stuff starts to dry down, and you should be able to tell. I mean, you have 50% dry down on that crop, even when you still have green leaves, you should be able to start to tell where stuff is going to fall and how that's going to play out.
Yep.
See the bigger picture come together. So,
and people pull their ears. Everybody pulls ears and does hand shelling. And again, stock rot and stock quality tests are the easiest tests in the world. You go squeeze it and you go push it over.
Yeah.
If it's hollow and it breaks off when you push it over, you probably need to move it to the top of the list.
Yep.
It's pretty simple. So yeah, that kind of puts us to where we're at right now. I had some notes about yield checks, but I think everybody kind of knows what to do. I don't know if you want to go into that or not, or maybe that's something you would like to talk about.
Listen, don't make me talk about the hula hoops, because I saw that on your list.
I love the
hula hoops. Gives me PTSD. I hate the hula hoops.
Hula hoops and
well, I can't hula hoop, so I think that also might be part of it.
Hula hoops are an awesome. I look like it's silly dragging a pink and purple hula hoop out to the cornfield or the soybean field to measure soybean stands. But hey, you got to do what you got to do. But no, I think for the most part, when it comes to checking corn yields, obviously, the biggest thing is understand how many. Talking about ear counts. Ear counts are important. Know what ears you're going to count, ears you're not going to count. You're counting harvestable ears, right? And your 1/10,000th of an acre, your 17-foot 5-inch row length and 30-inch row corn, right? And just find a process that works for you in terms of randomly selecting your ears, not just picking the big one or the small one. But,
that's how I like to do it.
If an ear,
I'm kidding.
Well, that's what the seed guys like to do. The seed salesman.
I'm not a seed guy. I'm not in seed, and I'm also not a guy.
To take the big ears, but no, have a random selection process to get an average size ear. Know how many harvestable ears. If an ear looks like it might go down through the snapping rolls, don't count it. And to me, when you do your little equations, rows around times length times ears, harvestable ears, divided by the old adage used to be 90. You can use 85. I typically use 80 in a kind of a good test weight year. This is going to be a solid test weight year, as we've talked about. If you have a year where you're out of nitrogen and it's been a drought, you're not going to have good test weight. You would use that 90 factor. If you're in a year where you're going to have pretty good test weight, I would probably lean closer to dividing it by 80. So,
well, I think some people need to go a little bit higher on their number this year than what I've seen, because like I said, I am not impressed with some of the numbers that I've seen coming off. But that's another reason I would encourage everybody to go out and don't just do road farming this time of the year. I mean, we push it all summer that you need to go out and be walking your crops, but
absolutely.
But man, this is a year where you should be going out and pulling some ears and pushing some stalks and really seeing what's up and what's going on, because I don't think that we're getting the full picture from the road.
Nope, I don't either. And I think that's probably a great place to leave it, is just, again, check things out, see what you got, and then prioritize your harvest list based on what you're seeing out in the field. And I think we'll be okay. And
if you don't know how to set your combine for wet corn, listen to our last episode.
That's right. What was the title of that podcast? Putting you on a spot.
Control what you can control.
Control what you can control. Absolutely. So, no, this has been fun.
That's kind of a tongue twister, though.
Yep.
So I'm going to stop saying that.
Yeah.
And with that, we'll talk to you next time.
That's right. Talk to you next time.